Good evening. Welcome to WSBI, your resource for success podcast program, where you get to meet inspiring women-owned businesses from across the country. And now, for your host, Kimberly McLemore.
All right, good evening, and welcome to WSBI, your resource for success podcast program, where you get to meet inspiring entrepreneurs and women-owned businesses from across the country. I am your host, Kimberly McLemore, and welcome to another night of sharing. With us, we have special guest Danielle Hughes. Danielle is the Chief Personality Officer of More Than Words Marketing. She helps people and the brands that target them to develop their genuine personality brand, creating content that sounds like you, and giving you the space to truly be yourself in your messaging. She has done work for companies like Discovery Channel, eBay, Gap, JED Foundation, Catalyst, JDRF, SEO and TD Bank, just to name a few. And while she can't pull a rabbit out of her hat, she can create and hone your personality brand, engage your audience, and deadlift you or your employees, but not at the same time. So, of course, without further ado, please help me welcome to my platform, Miss Danielle Hughes. Hey, Danielle.
Hey, Kimberly. I love the way you did my bio. I might have to hire you. That was very good.
Well, I appreciate it. Bring me on, okay? I've been told I had the voice, so I'm like, okay, you know what? I need to start utilizing this tool more often. So.
You definitely have the voice. It's very, it's great. So I could listen. You know, if I want to read the phone book for a half an hour, I'll just sit here. It'll be fine.
Well, I appreciate it. Well, welcome on. I'm so excited. We've been talking, as I always call it, to my listeners, in the green room. So obviously we're not together, but we've had a great conversation. So we're going to move this conversation to the listeners. So Danielle, before we dive into all the business stuff, why don't you tell the listeners a little bit more about who Danielle Hughes is?
Sure. So I got my start in what's called ad sales marketing, which is just about as boring and unsexy as it sounds. But I worked in television for quite a long time. Essentially, I went to college. I thought I was going to be an art director. I thought I was going to go work at an advertising agency and design all these campaigns. And during the course of my college career, I realized that I was a better writer than I was a designer. And somehow out of school, all these like fits and starts ended up in television and creating all of the marketing materials that like our salespeople would need to go out to sell programming to advertisers. Mm-hmm. So back then, so not quite before the internet, but kind of, it was a lot of printed material. So we were doing like media kits and sell sheets and PowerPoint presentations. And then from there, I ended up taking a little bit of a pivot and going over to a very small advertising agency, working on more consumer-focused messaging, still with like brands and advertising. And I had always been told by people throughout my career, oh, you should go freelance. But I was very nervous about it, and I didn't really know what that would look like. But I also knew that the corporate world wasn't necessarily right for me, although I couldn't put my finger on it until more recently. And at some point, things just didn't work out, and I was sort of let go from an opportunity. And I said, you know what, maybe now is the time to go freelance. And so freelance copywriter for a really long time. And at some point, I realized that as a freelancer myself, I was not taking control of my own destiny. I was an order taker for whoever wanted to hire me, and I wasn't really controlling my own message and the types of work that I wanted to be doing. So I decided to start my own company. I hired a business coach, and somehow through that process realized that what I love doing is writing content that's authentic and real and human and helping people do the same. And I think one of the reasons that I realized I never fit in the corporate world was because I was always myself. I was not Danielle at home and Danielle in the office, and they were two separate people. They were always the same person. And back then that was not encouraged, but now we live in a world where a lot more organizations And customers are looking for authenticity, and they're looking to connect with people. And how do you bring more of yourself into your message? And so that's what I do now is I work with individuals and small businesses and brands on how to put more of themselves into their message.
Well, okay. Well, we're going to dive into a little bit more of that. But I think when I'm listening to what you're saying, that the thing that stood out to me was how in the beginning that you were scared. And I think that, obviously we all go through that process of trying to figure out who we want to be when we grow up, right? And even though we're grown, we still are constantly sometimes fighting ourselves. So we have to get ourselves out the way in order to be the successful person that we want to be, or just live the life we want to be. And what do you say though to those people who are still constantly on the fence? Because we all know, even though coming into business today is easier than it was 5, 10, 15 years ago, how do you still get those people to use their personality, get off the fence and do what they love?
Well, so I feel like it's like two different things. So there's like the overcoming the fear, and then there's the tapping into your personality. But they do go a little bit hand in hand. And I will say that it is easier to not be afraid when you are clear about what you want to do, who you want to serve, and what you bring to the table. Right? So if you know the value that you bring as a business, as a service provider, right? What makes you different. If you know the type of audience that you want to go after, and if you know what they're struggling with, it is a lot easier to then kind of get into a business or message because you can speak directly to their pain points. And in terms of the personality piece, so what I've called personality brand and how I differentiate that from personal brand is that to me, the very word personal means private, right? So if somebody tells you need a personal brand, why am I sharing my private business with the world, right? That's nobody's business. But our personality is innately who we are. It's already on display. So how do we tap into that to just bring more of that to the forefront to create that connection with someone so that they're going to want to work with us, or they're going to understand what it would be like to work with us. And it's really fascinating that the more people lean into that message and they embrace a little bit of their personality, first of all, the less generic you become, right? So you have a point of view. You will definitely alienate some people, but I always say if you're not alienating people, you're doing it wrong. But you're going to attract the right people. Right? So the more you can be yourself, you're just making it easier for yourself down the line because people will understand what it's going to be like to work with you. They'll already know what to expect, and you're not going to have to pretend. You're not going to have to be one way, in your messaging and then another way on the phone. Right? The idea when you go into business for yourself is to work with the kinds of people you want to work with and take the kind of clients that you want to take, right? And obviously in the beginning, we got to take what we got to take, right? Because you have to pay the bills.
Right.
But eventually you want to get to a point where you're like, I only want to work with these types of people. And I only want to work with people that respect me and pay me well and they're good clients and are appreciative. And, that comes from being genuine and creating that relationship with them and having that level of trust. And that comes from showing more of who you are to them so that there is something to connect to.
Yeah. And you're right. That is true. I mean, but the thing I think about today is that, when we talk about having a genuine personality, there are so many more personalities. And because we're trying to, you talked a little bit about trying not to connect your personal self to it, but actually the business sides. But when people bring a business, they do look at that as one thing, not two things. So how do you get them to really engage in the fact that, hey, so when you're saying personal brand, what is it so personal that they want to share when they really shouldn't be sharing that with when it comes to the business side? Because like I said, today people have they have more personality than what we're sometimes used to because everybody can do whatever it is that they want to do per se. So how do you get people to just be more engaging and realize the real true difference between your personal individual self as versus your actual business self as well? What other ways can you bring that out?
Yeah, so I think that there's overlap, but I think the way I differentiate it is that you need to figure out for yourself what what you're willing to share and what you won't. Right. And so for some people, they're about sharing all the things, right? You just said, like, there's so many personalities out there. Some people, it's like too much. Right. But it might be too much for me, but it might not be too much for you. Right. And again, this is where that distinction is of you're going to attract the types of people who respond to that message. So I think you have to share. This is about sharing something about yourself, but in a way that it doesn't feel uncomfortable for you.
Right.
And that could be a variety of things, right? So I'll give you an example. I have a client who is in PR, and he has his own PR agency. And when he worked in the corporate world, he worked for all these like big PR firms, and he always, dressed very corporate, wore like boring suits and black socks and the whole deal. And when he went out on his own, when he went out on his own, his 16-year-old daughter bought him all these fun socks. And she's like, now that you have your own agency, can you express yourself more? Can you show some personality? And will you please stop wearing black socks?
Right.
And so now his whole thing is happy socks. And that has become his brand.
Wow.
Right? It's not private, right? He's not really telling you anything amazing, but there's a personal story to it. It's fun. And it ties into his message, right? Because PR is all about standing out. And if you wear something fun and noticeable, people are going to notice it. And it's a way to connect, right? So when he talks about, ask me about my socks on his website, people are going to be like, wait, what? It's just a little bit of something, that's about him personally, but it's not a personal thing that's going to make him uncomfortable that he's now sharing it.
Right. And
so that's what I mean when I
No, go ahead.
Talk about the difference.
And that's what I was looking for.
No, that's it.
Yeah, trying to get that understand, because I think, when the listeners are hearing that, because we hear so often about brand awareness, and what do you do? And, people are using so many different things now today in order to get that brand awareness to come out, but they don't really talk about the personality part of it. And so thought that piece was very interesting to really dig a little bit deeper into. And so you've worked with very, very large companies, like I mentioned earlier, like Discovery Channel and eBay. These aren't personal people. So how do you deal with a company that's that large, where you've got layers and layers of people? They have their own marketing, groups and all that. How do you get them to bring out what's unique about them?
So for a company, that's a little bit different because the brand is the personality, right? So like eBay has a brand, Discovery Channel has they all have their own distinct personalities. But the bottom line is that all these companies are looking to connect with their customers. So their content needs to sound more human and more relatable, as opposed to big and imposing and cold. And so I think if you look back on a lot of brands, from, years and years and years ago, they were writing to people as if it was very robotic, right? It was very very standoffish. There wasn't anything to connect to. There was nothing that gave that brand a sense of a personality. Now companies are being much more casual with their language, much friendly, right? They're using slang. It's like, we see you, we know you're real, they want to be almost like your friend. And so that's where the swing is for a lot of these brands. And obviously they all have there's very strict guidelines about how they present themselves, but all of them are moving in this just friendlier, what I call human direction, as opposed to, writing to an advertiser where it would be very stiff. Now you're saying, okay, well, the person at the other end of the line is still a human. What is that emotional piece that I can bring to this messaging that's going to connect with them, that they're going to want to do work with us, or that this message is going to be resounding to them or strike a chord?
Exactly. Yeah. It's the same scenario of hearing, when you see a commercial, you want to see people who look like you, people who feel, you can connect with. And we're seeing a lot more of that today, because I can remember growing up, I didn't see as many people who looked like me, being a Black woman or a Black child, on when it came to their marketing, when it came to their products, as if we didn't utilize those products. So, I love how things today are not just even looking at just Black people, but we're seeing more Asian, we're seeing all of our nationalities, because we all represent and everybody's utilizing these same tools and resources and, products that we purchase on, whether it's online or at the store. So, what you're talking about, that personality brand, that is absolutely, I think, one of the most important things that people could do in their business, no matter how small or how large that business is.
100%. And like exactly what you just said about like showing, it's diversity of people, it's diversity of perspectives, and just remembering that you're talking to so many different types of people. So the more human your message can be and the more inclusive, the more likely you are to have that message be attracted by a larger audience.
Exactly. So talk a little bit more though about the process of, before you were really into, like you said, you were into more TV and stuff and things were different. And of course you got away from that and now you're into this, but what were the steps that you actually had to take to make those decisions? Because like I said, I know you said you were scared, but we all have a past per se so before you got to this. So what really inspired you beyond people telling you that, hey, you're great at this? What was the other inspiration that came to your mind?
I was inspired by the fact that I got fired. So there's that. Somebody's like, we don't want you anymore. You're like, okay, I'm going to go do my own thing.
Right.
It's like a semi-mutual decision, obviously, but it's like that realization. I think if you are attuned to the messages that are being sent to you by like the universe or whatever, like it was a sign to me that, okay, this is not the right fit for me. So what is the good fit? And I also had like recently had a child at the time that this was all going on, and I wanted to spend more time with him. So I think for me, it was like, what other time am I going to get to sort of take this chance? And when you are at any point in our lives, right, nothing is permanent, right? So I could have tried this, and 6 months later, it wouldn't have worked out, and I would have found a job, right? I would have gone back to corporate somehow. I would have, I think I would have found something, right? So looking at things in a way that says, you know what, if I make this decision, it's not the only decision I'm ever going to make. It doesn't mean I can't take it back. It doesn't mean I can't change, right? So that's one thing. And then the other thing for me in terms of how did I sort of, kind of shift my perspective on like the freelance to business owner, I was very fortunate when I left the corporate world that I'd created a lot of relationships and I'd had a lot of good friends and colleagues that hired me when I left. So I didn't really have to do much networking. I didn't have to do much other than outreach to people saying, hey, I'm now doing this, and, if you need any help, let me know. But at some point, all that goodwill dries up, and I started to see the writing on the wall and realize, the phone's not ringing as much, and I'm not getting a lot of inquiries, and maybe I need to think about what am I looking at for the rest of, my life or the next X number of years, and what is the mark that I want to make on the world? And that's when I said, you know what, I should maybe make a little bit of an investment and find a coach, someone who can kind of give me direction on what's going to make sense for me. And also thinking about, what is the types of things that I really want to be spending my time on, and who are the people that are going to help me get there. And then I started doing a lot of networking, which is really important. And I had never networked before. And I know a lot of people don't like networking, but to me, it's just relationship building, right? Just going out there and trying to find people that you want to connect with, and that you can help, and that they can help you, and that will support you. And I ended up, finding a really great group, which led to several other groups, and, and then everything sort of snowballs from there. But I think the first step for me was just the asking for help, like realizing I can't do this by myself anymore, even though it's me and I'm a freelancer and it would be my business. There are smarter, better people in the world who I should be reaching out to, who should be helping me to do this. And that shame of I need to do it all myself, especially as a woman, just needs to go away. And I need to say, hey, I need help, and who can help me, get to where I need to be.
Right. And I love what you just said there about the fact that as women, it's like, you got to let that shame go, thinking that, okay, it's not that as a woman you can't do it, but, we're all human, and, everybody has, they can hit their head on the wall at one point. You got to say enough is enough. But I love how you really took the time to go back and reanalyze everything that you were doing, like I say, even though it was a choice, a decision that, they might have fired you, but like you said, it was, it was okay. You were fine with it because it was something you knew it had to be done. But throughout that whole process of you grew, you really started to hone into who you were. And, now here it is, you're teaching other people, you have been for years, how to hone into their own personality and what is really right for them. So what has happened throughout 2020? We all know that 2020 was a crazy year for everybody, and things are still building now. What did it look like for you? For most people, it was horrible, and then you have those other people who were, it was, hey, this is the greatest time we had, we've made more money type scenario any other where in my life. So tell us your experiences, and how did you have to pivot and maneuver around in 2020?
So I was one of those people that had a very good year. I'm very fortunate. And I think a lot of it had to do with the foundation that I had laid before 2020, right, of having these systems and supports in place. And I think this realization from a lot of people and companies that, wow, we need to message, and we need to message in a genuine way, because artificial messaging and fakeness and all that is not going to fly right now. There's so much going on. People need empathy. They need compassion, and they need to know that, brands or service providers understand what they're going through. So, I got very busy, and that has remained even busier. But it allowed me to do a couple of things. First of all, it allowed me to bring on collaborators and other freelancers and give them business, because I was able to expand and bring on some junior writers, and I hired a virtual assistant, and I hired a bookkeeper, and being able to give employment to other people made me feel really good. And it also then freed me up, right? The more help you get, the more you free up to focus on what you do best. And I don't do bookkeeping best or admin stuff best. It's not my thing.
Just as long as the money's rolling in, you're good. But the rest of it, no.
That's right. It's exactly. But it also opened the door for other possibilities. And so I had been working on a potential sort of one-day women's entrepreneur conference with another collaborator, and it was planned for May of 2020, and so obviously that didn't happen. But I said with another friend, we should try a virtual workshop. Let's see how this works. What's the worst we have to lose? We could advertise it. If nobody signs up, we haven't lost any money. We haven't spent anything. All we're doing is, trying out an idea. So it allowed me to sort of think in a different way. We tried this one workshop. It went well. We then pivoted that workshop into a multi-week kind of course / workshop. And then now I'm doing them on my own. And it's tapped into a new audience for me, which is more solopreneurs who are also just really needing to figure out their own message and, get that encouragement that they need to put their personality into their messaging. And it's the most fulfilling thing that I do is seeing people realize what makes them special and getting the confidence to own that and put it in their messaging. It's awesome. I love it.
Wow. And that's beautiful. And the thing I love that, everything you just said about, it's really, we're talking about that pivoting, realizing that, okay, you cannot do the things that you used to do, and it's okay. So we all have to think outside the box, and because everybody's so used to being in the box and worrying about, we have to do this and we have to do that because that's what's always worked. Well, we had no choice. You're on your knees now. You have no choice but to do something different. And, being virtual, everybody's doing a lot of virtual, and now it's a reality where even on the jobs we were told, we got to be here on the job, we got to see people who are actually working. well, it's like, well, either you're going to work or you're not going to work. Right. So I love how people have had to truly become themselves. They really have had to sit back and reanalyze and reassess everything, not just their personal life, but their professional life, whether they're, owning a business or not owning a business. And it's still happening today. And how do you feel? How do you feel about the business, your business and other people's business going back to the so-called norm? What is your thought on that?
So I don't think that we're going back. First of all, there's no backwards ever, right? We're only ever moving forward, regardless of all. So you're only progressing. I think there's going to be some hybrid of some ways that things were done, meaning in person, but I think virtual will always be here to stay, because I think so many organizations and people realize that they can do this. Like, some people are more productive. Some people are happier. Yes, some people are not as happy. And I really hope that there is something that we find that balance for people that really need connection, that need to be in person, that want to have, people around them. But I think that, I know people who are like, I'll never go back to a live networking group, because if I could network in my pajamas from my home and I don't have to drive anywhere, and then like, what if it's garbage and I don't meet anyone, right? Like the virtual has like removed the risk. There's no risk, right? You can log on, 5 minutes in, you're like, I'm out.
Exactly. Yeah. And even if you paid for it, nobody's going to know.
Correct. Right. It does not matter. It does, but you haven't wasted hours of like getting ready, getting in a car, or getting on the subway, going into the city, doing the thing, and then coming home, and then you've lost 3 hours of productivity that you could be working, right? And not that being productive is the main driver for everything, but I do think that there's a lot of instances where this virtual model will pay dividends. But I also I am desperately ready to like go back and, meet some clients in person and, be in a room of people where you have that energy. Right. So I definitely see it being a combination for sure, where there's just, you have more options, right? It's just an additional option. You want to do a remote? Yeah. You want to in person? Yeah. You want to just get on the phone? Yeah. Like, it's just another thing in your arsenal.
Exactly. And I think the thing that bothered me about the whole situation, that it's a shame that we had to go through this process in order to figure out, what else can be utilized. Teleworking has been something that's been talked about for years. Some people were doing it, some people weren't. But it was always this attitude of, well, I got to see my workers. It's like, what difference does it make as long as the work is getting done? And then also it's giving people that option of not feeling like you have to be stuck for 10, 15 hours working in an office environment where you can actually get up and breathe, and being in your own business, you can also work around to, hey, do I really need this many hours? I interviewed somebody about that last week. We were talking about the fact of that we still have to live. You still want to be able to have your time and not have to feel like, what the old saying is, well, you have to be the first person in the room and the last person leave. Those days are over
to leave, yes. I mean, I hope so. I really, that's another rail on corporate. But I agree with you, Kimberly. I think that it's unfortunate, obviously, and there's so much tragedy that's happened and trauma. But I think so many organizations are realizing that need for FaceTime is fake. And, while you need to, it's like, it's just a way because I think that was a way of managers being like, I don't have to take the time to get to know you, but if I see you in the office, I'll know you're working. Now you're forced to connect with your employees. Now you're forced to recognize them, to make sure that everybody is getting their fair due, to make sure that everybody's getting the right assignments. And organizations too are like, why are we spending millions and millions of dollars on rent? When people can maybe come into the office sometimes and then not others, right? Come in for big meetings, come in when it matters. But if you just need to get work done, like, stay home and get your work done. Exactly. And that's all. That's what's important.
Exactly. I couldn't agree with you more. And I hope all these listeners are listening. But if you're working for somebody, if they're not listening to you, that now's the time that they need to be listening to you. Okay.
Exactly.
The options are out there. So people aren't putting up with it anymore. And then I think too, obviously it depends on your family, environment, the whole 9 yards, but it's all about having the flexibility. And I think that's the most important part when it comes to balancing out your families. We don't have to worry about having those I can remember, when you're in the office, you have those questions about, well, do you have a family and do you have to be gone at this time or that time? Now you can have all those, that flexibility, and don't have to have those wasted conversations anymore. Because I think it's always unfair that if you're single, they expect you to stay longer. So I'm like, wait a minute now,
Yes.
what is going on here?
Yep, exactly.
And
if you're a man who leaves early for his child's thing, you're a hero. If you're a woman that leaves early for your child's thing, you're a villain.
Exactly.
Right? Again, yes. So I just, I think that this is hopefully like shining a light on people realizing the value that they bring to their organization, and that they're willing to step up and say, like, this is what I do, and I'm a good worker, and I do a good job, and I want to be recognized for it.
Exactly.
Right? And I don't need to be micromanaged and second guessed.
Right. And of course, now, if you are looking to start a business, this is the ample time to do that.
Yes.
Like I said, with all the flexibility, it's easier to have your own, but definitely the big part is, of course, knowing what it is you want and then dealing with your personality brand. So my other question for you, as we're getting close to the end of the show, is that what other advice would you give to someone who is looking to start a new business?
I would say definitely get support, meaning find people that have done this already who can help you, right? Don't just expect to do all the Googling and start it up on your own. I think it's really important to have a why, right? To understand why are you doing this, right? And it's okay if your why is I need to make money, that's a perfectly fine why, but question that even further, right? You want to make money, but what would really make you happy? Why are you doing this? Who do you want to serve? Or what is the product that you have? And then I think the biggest thing is just it's never going to be perfect. So don't futz around with it forever. Don't make excuses about, well, my website's not ready or this, and this. Try to get to a place where you're I'm just going to pull the trigger. And then there's always room to grow. Nobody starts a business perfect. It has to start somewhere. And if you start it perfect, where can you go from there, right? So you're better off starting at mediocrity and then making it better and better over time, because things are going to evolve too. You're going to evolve as a business person. Your business is going to evolve. Your audience is going to evolve. And you will be able to recognize those things over time and see what makes sense for you. But you have to just get out of the gate and get out of your own way and just start.
There you go. Couldn't have said that better myself. So, Danielle, do you have anything else that you would like to share with the listeners? And please let us know how the listeners can get a hold of you if they're interested in your services.
Oh, thank you. I would love, so I do a bi-monthly newsletter that goes out every other Friday. So if they want to sign up for that, it's usually just really sort of a fun musing that I have, and it's always around messaging, but it's not a typical boring marketing newsletter. They can go to my website, which is More Than Words Copy, and they can sign up for my newsletter there. And if you sign up for my newsletter, I have this really fun freebie that I call my About Me Mad Libs, which uses Mad Libs to help you build your about page and tell your story for your bio. And so I give you kind of two more traditional prompts and one really fun prompt, and it just lets you kind of see where you're willing to have a little fun and put some personality into your story. Because the hardest part for people is where do I even begin when I'm writing my bio? Well, so this is basically done for you, and you can fill it in, and then you can play around with it and see what makes you happy.
Wow, that's pretty awesome. I wish I'd have found you 5 years ago. I still probably need some help. All right. Well, it has been a pleasure having you on the show this evening. I really have enjoyed this conversation. I hope the listeners have learned a lot tonight, because Danielle dropped some major, major golden nuggets on this conversation. So if you weren't listening, you were definitely missing out. Definitely. So do you have any last words for
Kimberly.
our hon, you're welcome. You're very, very welcome. I really enjoyed it. Do you have any last words, though, for our listeners?
No, just, thank you. And just especially, we're talking women, don't be afraid to be yourself. Don't be afraid who you are. Recognize you're awesome. Own it and put it out there.
All right.
There
All
you go.
right. Okay. Well, again, thank you for coming on to the Tonight Show. And of course, before we close tonight, I just want to remind everybody that we have learned so much again about honing your own personality. It's not the same as personal, it's personality for the business, about personality brand. If you're not aware and don't understand it, please reach out to Danielle, support her business. It sounds fabulous. She's obviously in New York. So for those New Yorkers, you know where to find her at. But of course, it also leads me to that major question I ask every week is, what do you wish to existed for you in 2021? If you are ready to have that conversation, reach out to me anytime at Kimberly, WSBILLC@gmail.com. And let's just chat about your goals. Maybe you might want to write a book. Maybe you might want to start a podcast show. Maybe you might want to start some other type of a business. I'm here to assist you. And if I can't help you, we'll make sure that you get to the right person. But also, if you want more WSBI, maybe an additional podcast show, a free virtual live Q&A session with our favorite entrepreneurs, and we are doing a campaign raising $5,000 so we can provide more of these resources for success. And you can go to www.wsbilc.com in order to do the donation. But again, I hope you enjoyed listening to tonight's show. We'll be back next week with more amazing guests. Be sure to follow us on iHeartRadio and download our mobile app on Google Play or wherever you listen to your podcast. But until then, you enjoy the rest of your evening, and good night.
Good night, everyone. We will be back next Thursday evening at 7 p.m. Follow us on Spreaker, www.spreaker.com/user/WSBI. View our new WSBI website anytime at www.wsbillc.com and on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, LinkedIn, and Instagram.